Siegfried's heavy and ultimate DPs had some changes to them that weren't part of the universal system mechanic changes, so I didn't cover them in that video. However, they are still very much nerfs, so now is the good time to talk about them. Previously, if you whiffed with the first hit of the heavy version of the DP, the rest of it would still come out. Practically, this meant that if you had a read of some kind against Siegfried and you tried to dodge it, the rest of this DP would still come out and hit you, punishing your attempt to evade it. To remove that outlier situation, as well as to make that DP behave like his other DPs, which are also only single attacks, they made it so that if you whiff the heavy DP, only the first hit comes out. So now if you're going for some kind of read and spot dodge and Siegfried chooses a DP there, you'll actually be in a position to get a punish. This is a big nerf to Siegfried overall, as he did have some of the more ignorant DPs in the game, I would argue. And also, this is probably the second or third nerf that these moves have gotten in a couple of patches now. This nerf also applies to his ultimate DP. Previously, the second hit would come out even on whiff. And now, only the first hit will come out on whiff. Previously, you could cancel and combo a far light into a heavy oaken. 3,000 damage on a light poke follow-up is pretty high. This was a lot of power in terms of it being as a poke and a conversion tool, as well as being a pressure tool for Siegfried to have. The startup on heavy oaken has been increased by 2 frames, so now it hits at frame 18. Practically speaking, this means that Siegfried is no longer able to combo this from a far light. So instead of being able to use this as a reliable poke option that led to decent damage or into a pressure situation, now if you're trying to get a hit confirmed from his far lights, this isn't the option you should be going for. Siegfried is pretty much slated into going into his light oaken stance instead. Because you don't get the heavy stance follow-up in this form, you have to settle for the light follow-up, meaning that Siegfried loses 1,200 damage from these pokes. Of course, he can still combo this from his mediums. Or his heavy. Basically, it just shifts the reward. His lights are a little less rewarding, and his mediums are now where you're going to get more damage overall. A similar change was applied to the ultimate version of oaken. Previously, with its 13-frame startup, you were able to combo this from your far light. Being able to convert into corner pressure from any hit on screen from a light normal was pretty absurd. The startup has been increased by 5 frames, so now it connects at frame 18, meaning that again, this version of oaken will no longer combo from a far light. All things considered, this seems pretty reasonable, as again, being able to instantly corner the opponent from any sort of light poke or confirm was pretty insane. The light and medium version of oaken stance has another nerf to it as well. If you allow Siegfried to fully enter the stance, stand there, and then cancel it, it had a pretty quick recovery animation before, about 15 frames. So here you can see that I'm actually negative 19 in this instance. Negative 25 here. Negative 22 there. Of course, if you instantly held down and canceled the stance, you were negative 7. This was the safest way to cancel it. This animation, when you let Siegfried fully enter the stance and then cancel out of it, has been lengthened by 4 frames, meaning that in a best case scenario, instead of being negative 15, he'd be negative 19. This should mean that it's more reactable to recognize when Siegfried is dropping the stance, and so that you can go ahead and get your turn on offense going again, or potentially even punish him in it. In addition to the change that I just mentioned, his heavy stance has one more nerf to it. Previously, if you fast cancel out of this stance, you'd be negative 7. Pretty safe overall. Still punishable if the opponent immediately mashed on you, which is dangerous considering the options that Siegfried presents when he goes into stance, but it was something where it was theoretically possible. Now, this fast cancel animation has been increased by 4 frames. Holding down, you can see that I'm now negative 11, which means the opponent is more likely to actually get a punish on me and can potentially get an even stronger punish on me for it, making the stance overall less safe. Considering how versatile this stance is as a tool for combo game and for pressure game, I can understand why they want to make it a little less safe and give the opponent more opportunities to actually have some counterplay against Siegfried. While not as extreme as Belial's nerf, Siegfried probably comes out of this patch as the second most nerfed character. His DPs being a little safer overall for people to try and punish is a stroke in the right direction, and the reward that he gets from his far lights being reduced is also something I think that the character deserved. I'd even say that probably Oaken deserved the change that it had as well, because considering how versatile of a stance that it is, it was something where the opponent should have a little more counterplay against it at times. So we'll see how it goes. Again, I think that Siegfried probably doesn't shift too much from his current spot, but there's some edge cases where he's definitely weaker than he was before.